Ho, hello. Ho, doke, yauhe. Uh, Mie Adam amakiak pado. Nina iyokpe wachashta. Dakota yape wachozani mawashte Dakota yate. Hello, I'd like to welcome you here. My name is Adam. I'm a happy man, a very happy man. I've been here in the community for 4 or 5 years, learning the Dakota language and living with the Dakota community. I bring you here today. We were hoping to discuss some ideologies and some thoughts on the community development plan. We have narratives here. They'll be taking the lead, but I thought I'd start us off with a prayer. I would ask Tim Whitecloud to come and do a prayer to kick us off. Thank you. Oh, it's for them. Oh, it's for them. Yeah, because it's live stream.
All right, thank you, Adam. I'd like to thank Adam for gifting me with tobacco to do an opening prayer for this afternoon session. Very important that the community is involved in the work that the group has done here for us. I know when they do updates and that, I always see something new that I'm not didn't know that was here in Sioux Valley or what parcel of land. As you see all the maps here, land maps, and so it's always very interesting. You kind of get to know other. Sometimes we're just kind of stuck in our own area, and I just moved home 2 years ago to. Well, I live across the river, but I consider it home. And learning, I always knew what parts of the community existed, but this really breaks it down to like small sections. So I find it very important. And with us moving forward with land use planning, our population is only going to expand in Sioux Valley here, and we only got so much land in the community here that we can live on, use, housing, infrastructure, all that stuff is. We're getting very limited. Once they show you the these structures and maps and that, you'll see. And we've gotten some of this information in last year, and it shows how much land that is being used, and we're getting very short. Even though you look out there and you see lots of open fields and open areas, only certain infrastructure, buildings, and that can be put in those situations in those areas, and that's what we chief and council and the planning groups and the different organizations got to look at that. Not everything's good for across the road here, so we got to look at that, the flood zone and all that. So we look into that. The water, sewer, all that needs to be looked at before you can develop in a certain area. So you see a lot of the housing going up on top of the hill over there on the south. I'll call it south central or south. So, but that's the location is ideal because of the housing. We got to look at developing certain areas. It's not getting feasible to just put one house up there out in the field. So we're looking at stuff like that. We've got to try and pool our resources, pool all the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, all that type of stuff. So I kind of started all that before my prayer, but I'd like to thank them for asking me to say the opening prayer. When I registered as an adult. I didn't register as an elder. But I'm honored to be asked to do this. It's become um, a regular thing that I've been asked to do this, so I feel very honored to be able to do it and do the opening prayers for our community, for our people, for our meetings. So with that, I'd like to say at Teo Kantaka Tieto, but could hit to the Ushikirapu, Takude, Ukipas up the Techa, Tukashida, Wipazoko, but Oyate, Tokateki, Taku, Washtega, Taku Yechid, Yak, Tegahecha.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitecloud, for that prayer and for that introduction. My name is Connor Smith from our team at Narratives Inc. I'm joined by Paul Bell and Michelle Grover. We're planners, and we've been supporting the nation since late last year on its community development plan. We had the honor and privilege last winter, or this winter this year, to visit the community and to do a visioning session. And we were able to drive in the community to learn more about it and see it with our own eyes. We learned a lot in that time. We were able to visit the Buffalo. We were able to visit and see some of the infrastructure. And I want to say that this has been a really special visit this time because we've been able to see it in the spring. And we're very lucky to be able to see it over the 4 phases of this project, the 4 seasons. So we're very much looking forward to that. I want to express our gratitude, Wopida, for welcoming us into your territory and for honoring us for allowing us to support the nation in this work. So, as I mentioned, this is the 2nd phase. This is the 2nd workshop to support this community planning, community development plan building work. This workshop, or this phase, is titled Plan Building and Mapping. And part of the reason we put these 2 together is because one of these words is a lot of fun, and the other one is often less fun. Many people plan for the future in different ways. The way governments, First Nation governments, plan for the future is typically with policy. So the plan building piece, and for many people, policy is about as fun as watching paint dry, that's why we have the maps. So we've got lots of mapping around here, lots of important mapping and lots of policies that are intended to guide, or it starts on policies, I should say, policy directions that would turn into policies to guide the nation's development of the land, protection of lands, and celebration of lands 20 years into the future. The other thing I'll say too, for those who are joining online, we had a PowerPoint slideshow ready yesterday that we felt just didn't do it justice because of the importance of these maps. A static map just didn't do it justice. So we're trying out this sort of website story map approach. For those who are joining online, I think the link will be circulated for you to be able to access this presentation later and to use all the maps and resources at a future date after the presentation. There's also a survey. So for those of you in the room, you'll see there's 17 boards in the room, which divide the community into these sections that Councillor Whitecloud mentioned there. The survey that's online it matches these boards, so you'll be doing the same thing online as what you're able to do here in person. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, I'll move into the presentation here. So taking a look at the agenda here, I don't know, maybe Paul, if there's lights we might be able to dim at the front. Divided this presentation into 4 sections. We'll start with an introduction, a little bit of a recap and overview of the project. And we'll also talk about the plan building process. How do these pieces fit together in order to lead to change in the community over the next 20 years? We'll talk a little bit about the community's vision. So I mentioned we were here in workshop 1 to focus on the community's vision, needs, and priorities. So we'd like to present some of the findings there. The next section is about the background. So this goes into this plan building process, but understanding certain aspects about demographics, about population in the community are really important. Where we are today and where we could be in 20 years is important, as well as learning about the land, learning about topography, learning about different soils, learning about flooding that's occurred on the land, all of those kinds of things, as well as learning from elders and knowledge keepers about customary territory on the land, customary uses on the land. Finally, there's a short section on policy, which is what we're hoping to ask for your guidance on today. Based on the vision that we've heard so far and understanding the land and the people, we've got some policy directions here that we'd like you to tell us if we're on the right track for. If we're on the right track, these would turn into policies that would allow your leadership to implement actions that are support the community's vision. And if we're missing something, we'd like you to tell us. It would be helpful for you to tell us so that we can change course and make sure those things are included and part of the plan. So I'll move on here. As a little recap, in 2014, as I'm sure you all know, Sioux Valley signed its governance agreement, which affirmed its sovereign jurisdiction over its reserve lands. As part of this, the nation is in the process of implementing its own land laws to free yourselves from the provisions that have been forced upon the nation through the Indian Act. So many of these laws are intended to replace all those entries in the Indian Act having to do with reserve lands. And something we see here that's really, really exciting as a planner is that the nation has the ability to reimagine what these land laws could look like. You may take from what works really well today in municipalities and things like that, but you can also look to Dakota law and tradition informing the many of the land laws here. So this community development plan process is just a small part of that, but it needs to support the nation's broader goals in terms of lands and jurisdiction. So we understand that, and that's an important part of what we're trying to do in supporting the nation on this work. I mentioned a little bit about the plan building process. I thought it would be important to give you an overview of where these policy statements have come from. So I mentioned before that the vision, what we were talking about at the last session, and I should say I recognize some of you from the last session. It's a little less crowded here this time than the first time, which is it was really well attended. I think it was the most we'd had ever attended a visioning session. So it was really, really great to see the voices of youth, the voices of adults, and the voices of elders in that visioning step. And it's so important because this forms the foundation here. This is what's needed in the community, what the community's aspirations are, and what's important to the community to hold on to over the next 20 years. That's what we were looking for in that visioning section. The next one is the baseline. This builds on the community's vision. The baseline is, what are the facts on the ground today? And if nothing happened, if there was no development plan, where could the nation be in 20 years? What's the baseline situation over the next 20 years if there's no policy intervention or policy action? So we learn about the land in that baseline. The third step is policy. What are the things that are going to guide decision-making about the lands for the next 20 years into the future? And then, of course, action. Implementing these policies, building those houses, extending those water lines, building the new water treatment plants, all those kinds of things is the step that follows. So this is the plan building process, and it's very important that it is rooted in the community's vision, that it understands the baseline situation on the ground, that it has policies that are sensitive to both of those things so that action can be implemented to build all the things that you need, or to celebrate the land, or to protect the land. In terms of our work on this project, there are 4 phases. I mentioned we were here in winter 2023 for an opening ceremony, community visioning workshop. We did some ground truthing, which is visiting and seeing those places with our own eyes, as well as completing a background study. Phase 2, plan building and mapping here for the second workshop, continuing to map, and we're beginning to draft the community plan based on the feedback that we hear today about whether we're on the right track. We'll be back in the summer to present and discuss the draft community plan, community development plan, and confirm some of the strategies to achieve those things. And finally, in phase 4 in the fall, we'll be delivering the finalized plan, and there'll be a closing ceremony. Okay, these are some pictures from the from the visioning workshop. As I said, it doesn't show it here, but it was a pretty packed house, and there was lots going on. It was great. So we asked a number of questions here of community members. In thinking about this vision for the future, members had the opportunity to share a wide range of feedback. Something that was considered was the CCP surveys that had been done by the nation before we began supporting the nation. CCP is Comprehensive Community Plan Process, which addresses many aspects of the community, from healthcare to education to land use planning, those kinds of things. Members shared a range of feedback in these surveys, ranging from language and culture as priorities, education and opportunities for youth, health and wellness, economic opportunities, community strength and unity, sustainability and self-sufficiency. At Workshop 1, members had the opportunity to share their key priorities for the future. So there were 7 categories that this seemed to fall into here. Economic development and prosperity, vibrant culture and traditions and language, independent, self-governed and strong, relationships to the land, sustainability and stewardship, support for elders, educated youth who are leaders of tomorrow, and health and wellness in body, mind, and spirit. All of these, what's notable I think here about this chart is that green is youth, the number of youth who participated, blue are adults, and red are elders. In each case, everyone seems to be on the same page about what the priority should be. This is important that statement about unity in the CCP survey is reflected here, I think. The big ones as well that community members wanted to focus on were educated youth who are leaders of tomorrow. This plan is going to be implemented over the next 20 years, and the nation will continue to do its planning after that. Youth are going to be the ones who inherit these decisions and have to and live with them and implement them into the future. So this was important. Vibrant culture, traditions, and language, also important. All of these were important, but those were 2 that were quite significant in the findings from Workshop 1. We also had the opportunity here to ask members about what worked and what could use some improvement. And often when people see the red on the screen here, they think that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. We asked members to think about the future and think about the priorities that leadership should follow. So this is good to see. One of the biggest things that members mentioned, and this comes up often, we'll see this on the next chart as well, sports and recreation opportunities came up time and time again in the map-based visioning exercise and in some of the comments. This was a critical component to link the community together with recreation. And housing was also a significant one. So lots and lots of feedback that came through here about what works really well and needs to continue on, and what can use improvement. So really great feedback. Desired development. This is where it shows recreational services was one of the biggest responses that came in. In considering all of this feedback and the words from members, there were 7 guiding principles that became very clear. Language, culture, and traditions, community and family well-being, economic development, land, and the protection thereof or celebration of, infrastructure and housing, governance, and youth. So this is one that I'd invite everyone in the room here and everyone joining in online to take a look at, to study a little bit more closely. But this goes over some of the principles that should be guiding and should be reflected in all of the policy directions that you see on the boards here. A statement was crafted based on what members had shared, that it's very difficult in a sentence or two to capture all of the things that are important and that should form the spirit of the direction the community wants to go in. But the statement is, we are Sioux Valley Dakota Nation, an independent and self-sufficient people with deep-rooted connections to the land, to our kin, and to our language, traditions, and culture. We cultivate a sustainable community where youth learn the wisdom of elders, families are prosperous, and those in need are supported. We had a session earlier today with the elders where I had paused here to ask if this was on the right track. I'm going to do the same here again, and I'd invite anybody online to share any comments or thoughts about this statement. But the elders shared one suggestion for this statement, and it was to include water. Water is missing from this statement, and that's something that they'd like reflected here. I'm going to pause again here for everyone now. Any thoughts or comments about this statement? Does it capture what you think it should capture? I hear lots of whispers and deliberation, so I think that's a good sign. We can come back to this. So I'm going to, I'll leave it here, and if anything does come to mind, we'll come back to it. We'd appreciate it if you could provide your thoughts, if you have some, about this. Because again, this statement is intended to inform the spirit of the direction that all of these changes, all of these policies are intended to have and embody. I mentioned the second component of plan building is this baseline, understanding where we are today, what the situation on the ground is today. We spent a lot of time looking at demographics, population. So this chart shows historic growth in the community and at the nation level on and off reserve from 2010 to 2022. The green is the overall population, yellow is on reserve, and blue is off reserve. The nation was about 2,337 people in 2010. It is now 2,691 people. It's just about 300 people in the last 12 years. You can see the on-reserve population was roughly 1,416 in 2010, and today is in 2022 it was 1,403. So pretty flat over that time. The on-reserve population has taken the balance, and that's where most of the growth has been for the nation. Now, the important thing about looking at population like this is that it provides hints about different stories to tell about why this is happening. So it's a starting point for further research. This is called a population structure pyramid, and it basically shows on the green side is men in the community, on the yellow side is women, and then vertically youth are on the bottom, elders are on the top. And you can see here Sioux Valley is blessed with a very youth. There are many youth in the community. And then you can see something change along here. So I should say too that the squiggly lines that you see are the Manitoba average. So you can see how it compares to the Manitoba population structure. And you can see here that around ages 20 to 29, that it drops below that Manitoba average. So what's happening at this point for young adults? This is another component of the story, hints of a story that could be that the population could be telling. The other really important component to some of the research we did was to look at population projections. So projection is not a forecast. It's not what the weatherman does. These are more creative exercises to imagine possible futures if certain things happen. So this is the moderate scenario, the middle scenario that we looked at. And this one imagines that the nation is able to build lots of housing to accommodate current need and future need. So in this scenario, you can see it stretches all the way up until 2043. In this scenario, it reverses that trend of most of the growth being off reserve. Many off reserve members are able to return home, and the growth in the community is able to support new housing in the community is able to support that growth that's happening in the community. So this is a potential future. Overall, the nation's at the national level, the nation would grow at the same rate it had been in the past. So this doesn't reflect an increase in birth rates or anything like that. This is just there's more housing in the community. This is what it could look like in 20 years for the on-reserve community. So I should say here, 1,400 people today on reserve. It could be as many as 2,171 in 20 years if you build out adequate housing and accommodate that growth to make the off-reserve plateau. As I mentioned as well, in addition to demographics and population, we look at the lands and waters. So the reserve has a land base of approximately 9,000 acres, 9,179 acres, or 3,700 hectares. About 41% is currently used for agriculture, 33% for open space and grasslands, 14.5% is mixed forest, and about 11.5% is roads, houses, and development. An important consideration that we need to look at is where the land can support growth or development, what areas are going to require some additional consideration in order to build in, which areas should be avoided. So this map is called a development capability or development suitability map. And it shows different classifications of development capability. Really, really easy to grow or to develop new lands in high development capability areas in the white there. And at the other end is limited. It's a little bit more consideration needs to be added in there. Doesn't mean you can't build there. It just means it's a little more challenging too. So this map considers flooding. Actually, much of the red that you see there is data pulled from the 2011 flood, which I know was particularly challenging in Sioux Valley. It also considers buffers around your watercourses and valleys to protect those from development, about 30 meters on either side. It also considers soil type. So certain soils can support bigger buildings and bigger development, whereas others are less suitable for that. It also considers slopes. Anything over about 25 degrees is pretty difficult, and you need some different engineering solutions in order to accommodate it. And the last thing that is considered, slope, soil, is sensitive areas. So these include cemeteries and cultural reserves. There's buffers on those, and there's also on things like the landfill is also one. You don't want to put residential right next to the landfill, for instance. So this isn't an indication that leadership's going to go build in all the white areas or anything like that. It's just a way to help to prioritize and plan for where this new development could occur if it is desired in those locations. So again, I wanted to pause at each of these maps for those online and those in the room here. If there are any questions you want to zoom in anywhere to think about some of this development capability work that was done. Any questions about the map?
Ledger on the bottom. I just can't read the ledger on the bottom left there. So, yeah, I just wondered what that looks like. It's all
See, but we're located about right here. Medium low mainly has to do with the soil type. So these are called eroded soils. Lots of big rocks and sandy soil is a little bit more challenging from a foundations perspective. Low is these orange areas, and those are mainly the slopes where it's really too steep for development. And then limited is mainly the flood zones and the buffers around your water courses in the community. So again, this is a good one to take a look at later. Again, you can visit these resources after the presentation as well. Another really important one is understanding the relationship to the land today. So we say, I've said land use a couple times, so I've broken my own rule in this presentation, but you often hear about land uses in community plans, in municipalities and towns. We've heard in our experience in many communities that it doesn't really capture everything that this plan needs to do. So land use implies a one way, we're on the land and we're using it. Contemporary land relations, a relationship to the land, implies there's something else going both ways here. So in many cases you'll be developing on the land, but we understand that there are also things that that the community needs to give back to the land, and it has to be a two-way street. So instead of land use in this community development plan, we're referring to land relations to include things like environmental protection, to include cultural components, cultural reserves, to include protection of the lands. We've also had the opportunity to meet with the nation's environmental coordinator, who was able to share a lot of the policies and thinking and some of the study work that's being done on the native grasslands in the territory. So this is an important piece of language that they wanted to share here. So we have broken the contemporary land relations into multiple different components here. I'll go through them again. So brown is agricultural lands. Red is commercial. You can't see it down there where the gas stop is. Services and governance is in blue. Industrial is in gray color. Light green is parks and recreation. Yellow is residential. White is roads and rights of way. Purple is cultural reserve. Dark green is forest and natural reserve. And then the light colors are grasslands. So I should say as well that all of the names for the community's buildings came from, if I zoom in here, all these places are named. This all came from Mr. Pratt's grade 9 geography class. So attribution is important. As the authors, grade 9 students from the community named all of these and took all the pictures. So so thank you for that's awesome. So again, we're on a map. I'm going to pause again if there are any questions here. I'll note as well that these are the same designations that you'll see on the boards and you'll see in the survey after the presentation. So they help to inform what uses are compatible, what uses can be expanded, what relationships are compatible, what relationships can be expanded. You don't want to be putting residential next to industrial uses or public works, for instance. And it helps to plan out new sites and the kinds of relationships that you'd plan in the future. One relationship that, in our experience, takes up a lot of breathing room is housing. So this community development plan will consider many aspects of commercial. It will consider governance and services. It'll consider cultural reserves, your forests and preservation of those. But housing is something that we know leadership is focused on. It's a huge priority for leadership right now. And we also know that because of the land requirements for housing, this is something that takes up a lot of focus, and it's going to take up a lot of focus in the community development plan. In order to meet today's housing need, which includes the housing wait list, you need about 104 new houses. So a deficit of about 104 houses. In 20 years, the community may need, if we're assuming that medium population projection, about 2,000 people living on reserve, needed an additional 360 houses. So this could take hundreds of acres in order to accommodate. It depends on what kind of housing, what mix, and what strategies and policies would be in place. But it's important to point out that, and I'll keep scrolling here, that the nation does have the land base to support all of these things. But it's really important that the policies that are in place to have the right mix of housing, the right kind of housing, to protect the areas that need to be protected. As Councillor Whitecloud said, there are certain areas when it comes to infrastructure perspectives that just aren't going to be possible. So to identify those. So in order to make sure that all of this happens according to the community's vision, for celebrating that land, for protecting those environmental resources, it's important to make sure that those policies are consistent and as accurate as possible. So this leads into this policy building piece where we're hoping to get feedback from you today. What we've done here is divided the community into these community development nodes, we've called them. And they're basically collections of the land based on consistency of, it's all the same cluster of the kind of relationship, and divided by, the borders are along streams and other geographic features. This has helped to target policies that are going to be specific for those areas. So what we're hoping to do is to have the community, if there's a lot of writing here. There's probably way too much. You'd be here all night if you were going to look at every single one of these to consider each one. But we'd recommend, it'd be very helpful to visit the one where you live, if you live in the community, where your family lives, perhaps, or places you visit or that are particularly important to you. In each one, you'll see a list of key considerations. These are things that are unique to each of these areas that we know about, and we may not have the full list, so if we're missing one, please let us know. You can see some sticky notes on there already for things that are missing. Underneath that, you'll see priorities and recommendations. These are policy directions that we would take, and we'd like to hear if you agree or disagree with the direction we're going. Please leave us some comments so we know why you agree or disagree. So again, online, that's the survey that's provided online says the same thing. Again, you don't have to complete the entire survey. That would take a long time. You can scroll through to the areas that you'd like to provide your feedback on. I'll also say behind me here, there's 2 boards that are general policies for the whole community. If you could take a glance at those, that would be helpful as well. So with that, I will pause for questions before I know we're all eager to run up there and put stickers on the boards. But I want to say, Padamaya, thank you very much for your time and attention tonight. And thank you for welcoming us into the community today. Thank you.
So as I mentioned earlier, my name's Adam. I've been the Sioux Valley land manager for just a brief time. And as you can tell, we've been hard at work. I was tasked with delivery of a community development plan and a land use plan. And the concept was, let's get it derived from the community first, a community-driven land use plan. And so that's what this is all about. I'd just like to say, Padamia Pado, Wopida, Achichie Pado. Thank you. I'm grateful for you all to be here and for everyone who attended online. Thanks.
Any questions? Any questions online? Nope. Okay. Well, for those in the room here, we've got snacks and beverages if you'd like, and at your own leisure, you can go up and take a look at the boards. Again, we'd greatly appreciate the feedback if we're on the right track with these policy directions. Our next step here is to come to the community with a draft community plan. So we'd love your support and help and feedback if you could. Thank you.
Just in closing, I just wanted to let everyone know, for those in attendance, we have a little fun draw at the end. So the sooner we get everything done, then we'll get that going for you guys. Okay, thanks everybody.